business and sustainability is what we're going to talk about for the next half an hour. And my job in moderating this panel is really to spark a conversation. This is an inordinately complex subject matter. Someone once told me I can cut my carbon footprint to 0 tomorrow, but I'd have to put 45,000 people out of work to do it. So I think often when we look at the role of corporation in business, there's an assumption of a very binary relationship between what they could do and what they should do, that when we explore the topic in a little bit more detail, it becomes a bit more nuanced and complicated. And so my job here is not to necessarily answer the questions so much as they are, or to provide answers to the questions, but to spark a line of discussion that carries forward from this, so that as you engage with each other, with the panelists, and going forward from here, you have some ideas or things to build on to help maybe get into that nuance just a little bit more deeply. So thank you all for the opportunity to be here. I'm very honored by it. So I know we have people here from all different countries. I don't want to assume that anyone does or doesn't know what these companies do. So I'm just going to ask really quickly, Leon, Charlene, John, if you could, in just 30 seconds or less, tell us what ING, Bechtel, and AT&T are. Please, Leon.
Well, ING is a bank. Let's put it out first. So now we're done with that. And we are, of European banks, one of the biggest banks out of the European banks. And we operate in about 41 countries with both retail and wholesale banking operations.
Bechtel Corporation is an engineering and construction company. Are you all familiar with Bechtel at all? Some of you? Okay. We're a $40 billion company. We've been around for 118 years. We're privately held, and we specialize in building very large, complex mega projects, energy and infrastructure. To give you an example, we cut our chops building the Hoover Dam. That's really where we started. One of our most recent projects that we're very proud of is the Ivanpah solar thermal plant, outside of Mojave Desert. So we do very large infrastructure for the world.
So good morning. Thanks for having me. My name is John Schulz. I work for AT&T, and in honor of Prince, we are the company formerly known as the phone company. When I joined AT&T in 2002, we were the phone company. We helped people connect by putting a device was connected to their wall and talk to somebody elsewhere whose device was also connected to the wall. Now we connect people in totally different ways. We do it through the air. We were the company that helped Apple bring the iPhone to market. We now connect things to each other so we can see things that we never could before. We're also big in television and video entertainment. So we have come a long way in a short period of time. So glad to be here.
My oldest child is 12, and I was explaining to them, they've never known a landline. I was explaining to them how it used to work, and they actually didn't believe me. But since you had the mic, if you could, I would love to also just kind of get a quick sense of the goals that each of you are pursuing from an environmental standpoint as a baseline, and then we'll ask some individual questions, please.
Sure, thanks. Just last year, we've been setting goals, iterative goals, for quite some time. Those were related to things around energy efficiency of our buildings, fuel efficiency of our vehicles, things like that. Last year, we did something different. We set long-term goals. So we set goals that were set for 2020, so about a 5-year horizon, and then again for 2025. And the thought there was that these goals would provide a vision, a bigger idea of the company that we are and why we do what we do. And so one of the flagship goals that we developed was this idea of creating benefit and impact for our customers that is 10 times that of our own footprint. So we recognize obviously that we're a big operation. We have our own footprint. We are going to continue to push that down as best we can. But we recognize that our technology, mobile connectivity, intelligence that you can get from that visibility through that mobile connectivity can create huge opportunities for our customers, whether that's smart transportation, smart housing, smart energy, all those good things. And we have a goal to help our customers, work with them, develop solutions together to create 10 times the benefit for our customers of our own footprint. So we can dig into more of that, but that's at a high level our flagship goal.
And that's by?
2025.
What would you say your ratio is now of 10x in 2025? Where do you think you would be now?
So that's a great question, and this is part of the challenge. Usually we have had a good idea of how we're going to reach our goals when we set it. This is out of our comfort zone. So we don't know the answer to that question because we have yet to define the methodology. How do you quantify that benefit for our customers? So we've got to work with them. We've got to work with credible third parties to do that well, to do that credibly. So right now, I don't know the answer to that question, which makes me a little nervous. But that's part of the adrenaline of it. That's part of the motivation. That's part of the inspiration, was to reach and get there together. So I don't have a great answer for you in terms of the current status, but that's our challenge that lays before us.
I want to ask one more question about goals before I ask Charlene the same. So there's an inherent risk in this. When you set a big goal and you put it out there, I'm going to bring up an example of Hewlett-Packard gave a goal of eliminating a certain chemical from their supply chain over a certain period of time. It was a very aggressive goal. They announced that they were going to miss it 6 weeks, by about 6 months. Greenpeace broke into their corporate campus, put a big skull and crossbones on their roof, and they got a ton of terrible bad press for it. Not very well known is that the paint Greenpeace used was so toxic they had to replace the whole roof in the building. So the question then is that breeds an inherent conservatism in goal setting. So give us your thought. You don't know, you're scared, you're uncomfortable. Did you have to sell it internally? If so, what role did people play? Like, how do you set a big goal and build consensus behind it?
Well, that's a great question. I think you've gone off script.
A little bit. I set a goal. It scared me.
Yeah, that's right.
Now I'm pursuing.
Right. That's right. No, that was a very collaborative exercise to gain approval for that goal. And part of my job, I have a really great job. I get to work across our company, lots of different business units, lots of different leaders within the business. And this was a different experience to work with them, to get comfortable. And the reason we were able to get there was because it really showed, whereas our previous goals that were safer, that we had a good feel for, they were more iterative, and while they showed progress, didn't really show intent, didn't really show vision, didn't really show what we were after. And I think that ability to set that vision, to set that goal in a bigger sense was what allowed us to get out of that comfort zone and have lots of support. The other thing I will mention, though, is that the old goals were mostly about efficiency and internal focus. Now, when we can turn our focus and work with customers, it changes the conversation we have with our customers. Like, we work with big industry, we work with big manufacturers of goods and products, we work with consumer and industry products. How do we work together to infuse technology to help them be more successful, to help their customers? That's a totally different conversation than we've had in the past. And that's exciting and really creates opportunity with those customer relationships. So it's flipping it from that conservation risk conversation to let's collaborate and be opportunistic and tackle it together. So I think that's one of the reasons it worked.
Great, thanks. Charlene, if you could, tell us, what are your environmental goals? How is Bechtel pursuing this?
So as a construction company, an engineering construction company, people often think that, we don't focus on mitigating or trying to avoid some of the environmental impacts of our projects. And I think for some companies in our industry that may be true, but for us it isn't. So like many companies, and building off of what John said, we looked internally, of course, and said, well, what can we do? What can our environmental goals be? But about 10 years ago, we said, let's stop looking inward, and we'll continue that work, but really start looking external, start looking beyond us, because it's really our projects that have a huge impact. So some of the things that we're really focusing on from a goal perspective is, how do we help our projects become more sustainable, what we're building? How do we help the communities where we're building become more resilient to big weather issues or weather conditions and climate change. So we're spending a lot of time looking externally and telling our customers, here, we're going to help you become more sustainable. We're going to help you become more environmentally conscious. We're not going to wait for you to do that, to bring that to us or ask us for that. I'd say our sustainability is just part of our value system as a company. We really focus on protecting people and the environment, and we mean that. We focus on promoting economic development in the places where we work, in the communities where we work. And we really recognize that when we leave a project, we're leaving a legacy. We build big things, but after about 5, 7, 20 years, we leave that project. But we want to make sure that that community we've left is resilient, that we have promoted economic development, and that we're moving things forward, not just building things.
Right. I want to talk about the communities in which you operate. So you've mentioned being a privately held company. You're headquartered here. Big companies typically have the mission statements and their values and sort of the articulation of what they're supposed to stand for as a company. And when you go out and you work inside of a different community out of country or in a different market, often within that you have a different value set. So your goals might not necessarily align with those within the market that you serve. How do you make sure that you have good value alignment in the markets you're serving?
Well, I think a lot of that comes from just the conversations that you have with the communities when you start out on a project. I will say that we don't change our value system simply because of where we're working. So we have our tenets, as I just mentioned, and those hold true no matter where we are. So we spend a lot of time talking to communities. We spend a lot of time engaging indigenous peoples. We look at training, what can we do? But we really don't alter our value systems. And, I'll say, looking into the future, I would say the last century, from Bechtel's perspective, the last century was largely defined by the Industrial Revolution, and we really see this next century being defined by sustainable development, and we want to be leaders in that.
Right. Great. Leon, tell us a bit about, you almost gave a sheepish apology or acknowledgement of the fact that you're a banker, and bankers have had an interesting run of things in the last decade or so. Tell us about how you see environmental sustainability driving innovation in the banking sector.
Yeah, so let's first explain a little bit how banking works. So it's on the one hand, you take money in, which is called savings, and that you lend that to people or businesses, and then you call it mortgages or loans. Are you with me so far? Any questions about that? Yeah? Very intelligent audience, and it's quite a simple business. So you wonder why people get paid a shitload of money who are in this industry, but they do. And that's also for a reason, because we are also in the business of trust. People trust us as savings money, and we trust people that will pay us back. And we also have a lot of lawyers and legal contracts to help us with that. But that's in essence what banking is about. And sustainability and environmental sustainability can help us in regaining that trust, because during the financial crisis, we lost a lot of trust amongst our customers. And one of the key drivers that's also in research is that people want to know what we do with their savings money. How is my savings money spent when you lend it to people? And that's why we have strict environmental policies, which we use to check upon when we lend money to businesses if they are doing any nasty things with it. So, for instance, what we did to make it very concrete is that we announced just before COP that we would stop financing new coal-fired power plants. And those are statements, but not only statements, also real actions that really help us in regaining that trust from our retail customers.
Terrific. John, I want to come back to you, and then I'm going to ask your colleagues to comment on this as well as they see appropriate. One of the first times I ever did any work with AT&T was you were under some pressure from an NGO, and you were looking for ideas on how other companies had dealt with it. And I think the nature of the large corporation and the relationship with the NGOs, with the Greenpeace and the Forest Action Networks and so forth, have changed a little bit. So what have you learned from the activist community that's helped you be a better company? And what do you think they've learned from you in terms of how to engage?
So I think it is changing.
Right.
I think it is changing. We're seeing more collaboration now than we have ever in the past, and I think that's healthy. I think we still have conversations where the missions are not as aligned, but oftentimes more than not now we're able to find common ground. And I'll share with you an example of a particularly productive conversation that we had. And it was with the Environmental Defense Fund. Does everyone here? Are people familiar with that? It's a large NGO, global, but does a lot of work. And we started working together with them. They have a summer intern program called the EDF Climate Corps program, where really outstanding students from MBA programs come in. And we started engaging with them on our energy footprint. We use a lot of electricity to power the buildings and the equipment, and so we wanted to hone in on ways to really tackle the biggest opportunities. And these students came in, and it's a short time. It's a 10-week span over summer, so it's not a whole lot of time, you think, but it's amazing how much a smart, focused, ambitious person can make change in that 10-week time. So working together with EDF and the Climate Corps program, we've actually subsequently hired a few of them. They've been great assets to us. But that springboarded us into a bigger engagement with them. It was really focused on water. And as a company that has operations around the country, including drought-stricken areas like California and the Southeast, we were very aware of water in our communities. And we use a fair amount of water to cool our buildings, and so we actually worked together with EDF to dig into that. And actually, they brought expertise in engineering, they brought expertise in the business case, and we developed together a tool that we use to analyze our water use and reduce it. And then we actually made it public and shared it for anyone to use. And in fact, we've made a promotional campaign for building operators to use it and try to drive that water use down for cooling. So we continue to have conversations with a wide range of NGOs, and what we find is where we can find those productive conversations and work together is really what's more common these days than the campaign-oriented things that you described earlier.
Perfect. So Charlene, when you asked how many people had a familiarity with Bechtel, there were not a lot of hands that went up. You're one of the biggest companies that very few people know of. And I'll confess, I didn't know much about you until we started working with one another. So you have a very different relationship with the external stakeholder groups, AT&T, big brand. You guys, more than 100 years, multi-generational family, private, and yet you've managed to sort of fly under the radar screen. I can imagine that it would be tempting to try to keep a low profile for as long as you can. So how does Bechtel look at external engagement on environmental issues now?
Yeah, I'd say that for a long time, we did try to stay under the radar. Being a construction company, we're not the client. So if it's AT&T that's hired us or it's Chevron that's hired us, really for a long time, that's where all the attention would go. But you talk about activists. What we find when we go into a project, and I'll say, for example, in Australia, on a small island in Australia, Curtis Island, when we went into that project, we had 3 customers very well known. We were not well known, but what we realized in that effort is that we're the ones who are the first ones on the ground. So we're the first ones that the community sees. And that really drove home to us that we don't actually have the luxury, if it was a luxury, we don't have a luxury to stay under the radar. And as I said earlier, we really look to see, to make sure sustainability is our legacy going forward. And in order to do that, we have to be out there, we have to be public. Just like what John had mentioned with AT&T, we have some organizational, as we call them, enterprise goals that we are going to launch probably within a couple of months that really step out from what you would normally expect from a company like ours. We want to engage in the conversation. Our president and chief operating officer of our company, Brendan Bechtel, is 35 years old. He is all about sustainability, and he personally says he wants sustainability.
Trade-off of investing in sustainable projects. So, which in some cases may be true, and in others may be, a bit of folklore. But how does the bank balance the need to provide an economic return to your shareholders with your imperative of accelerating financial performance?
Yeah, there are two sides on that coin. On the one hand, you have what we call the mitigate harm part. So that's the so-called more the ethical side of doing business. And that is what we put on top of what is legal. We put an extra layer. So we are very transparent about that. So we have animal welfare policies on fur, on coal, as I just said, nuclear, etc. So, and there you run the risk that people within the bank, but also shareholders will think, well, that you try to shrink the business over there because you're not creating this level playing field anymore, and you leave some good business on the side. But on the other hand, we think it's very good also to drive progress, and we are actively growing our portfolio in renewable energy, like geothermal energy, wind energy, you name it. And on balance, we see two things. The first, overall, our $200 billion corporate loan book is growing. The renewable part is growing faster than what you could say the mainstream part. And on top of that, the risk profile of our loan book is also improving because sustainable business is future-proof business, and for us, it's better business to lend to.
Excellent. We've heard a theme about empathy. And I know we have just a few moments remaining, so I want to invite each of your comments on the emotional connection that you have to your work. I'll share an anecdote, which is that someone that I've done a lot of work with who works for a competing bank, so I won't mention who they are. She had a CEO direct report position. The job of running sustainability was open. She asked for it. She took it. It was a demotion, and her friends threw her a going away to your career party. So there has to be a certain emotional tie-in for people to really pursue this as a career. Not to say that you can't advance from it, but you're still working your way and sort of creating legitimacy for this as a profession. Why do you do what you do?
Well, I could say that where I live, my house is really at 5 meters below sea level. So that's more than, I think, the height of this room. And I live on reclaimed land. So 60, 70 years ago, where I lived, was sea. And when I work in my garden in the weekend, I can still find shells as a result of that. So you can understand that I have a particular personal interest in the results of climate change. That's one. And there's also a saying in the Netherlands, God created the world, but the Dutch created the Netherlands. And that's the part where I live. But when I was approached for this role 3 years ago by the board, I didn't ask for it. And my first reflex was sustainability. That's something you do next to a real job. I was running a big call center operation, over 2,500 people, 120 million. So, and I thought, well, this is a career killer. And I must say that since I did it, this is the first job that really changed me as a person. And the best way to express it is that my kids tell me that we have completely different, more interesting conversations during dinner. And my son, who is now taking his final exams, he will study global sustainability science as of next year. So that's the biggest compliment you can get.
I knew you 3 years ago. I can agree you're a lot nicer now. Charlene, real quick, why do you do what you do?
Well, with the same question, I didn't see sustainability as a career killer. I actually saw it as an opportunity and an opportunity to make a difference and to create a sense of purpose within our company. We don't, as a construction company, we don't just build things. We create economies. We enable countries to develop their economies and to move forward and to create a middle class. And if we, as a sustainability organization, can help improve the quality of that, then why wouldn't you want to do that? So when I started with Bechtel, and I came into the company 6.5 years ago, running corporate affairs, the week before I started, the CFO called me and said, "Oh, by the way, we're going to give you sustainability." And I said, well, what the hell is that, right? What is that, a little recycling? What is that going to be? But after coming into the organization, meeting Phillip, having him talk me into his organization while I was sitting in a car wash, we were on the phone, literally, I realized that this was an opportunity where we could really create something that mattered, something that lasted, and who doesn't want to be a part of that?
So in 2008, I wrote a memo that I wanted to shift my career. I was doing something very different with an AT&T social. It was a software real estate job, but I had an awakening that I needed to do something that mattered, for which I was aligned personally in my professional career. So has everyone here seen the movie Jerry Maguire? You guys seen that movie? Yeah, it's a great movie. I'll show you the money. That's not what I said. I was earlier in the movie where Jerry writes the memo about how he thinks the company should be, right? And Jerry sends the memo around. He gets fired for it. Well, I wrote my memo about how AT&T should become a leader in sustainability, and I was given a shot. I had no business being in that role, but they gave me a shot. I became the carbon footprint guy. I then moved over to energy efficiency projects where I really got technical experience. So I did this because it was relevant and gave me purpose. I've had a wonderful opportunity in a career that has opened up doors in lots of different directions within my company. So I think you have to follow your passion. You have to don't be afraid to take risks. Don't be afraid to learn on the fly. Learn how to communicate effectively with the audience that you're trying to reach. Because I thought that sustainability was a technical job. I thought if you knew how to talk about carbon per million, you'd be able to do this. That's not what it is. It's about reaching people. It's about communicating with them effectively, and that's been a really important part of this AT&T effort and my career and my personal career.
Perfect. Charlene, one piece of advice in 10 seconds are left. You're a young person in your own company. You want to make an impact.
Don't be afraid to go to big companies. We need you. We really, really need you to move us forward. Be fearless, be passionate, and be resilient. Because with all that fearlessness, you're going to need the resilience.
Perfect. Leon, how do you make an impact?
Connect to the business agenda, so move away from philanthropy and volunteering and pushing elderly people through the zoo and all that kind of stuff. Connect it to the business agenda. And the second one, catalyze the change.
Fantastic. I'm going to be arrogant enough to offer you one piece of advice as well. Every one of you are here because you are ambitious, right? Because you see a problem and you're interested in exploring solutions in your own role within it. Whatever you think you're capable of, you're capable of more. And I will tell you that it goes by so quickly. I started the job that brought me in contact with these people when I would have been young enough to be sitting in this audience. It goes by really fast. You have more time in the day than you think you do. Get out there and make an impact if you want to, but don't say you don't have enough time to do it, because time's running out and we need you to be a part of the solution. Thank you all so much.